Hi, in this tutorial, I'll talk about Franklin block or block. This tutorial is going to be very important if you are a developer. Franklin block or block are the basic building block of your edge delivery services website. So as part of this tutorial, I'll talk about what is building block and why do we need a block. This is the most important question and we'll talk about this question at end of this tutorial where you will understand why do we really need a block, how to author a block, how to style block and how to manipulate DOM of a block. Because DOM is different and what you need as a UI is different. I'll talk about it and how to add styles and other stuff to a block. So there are two things in a block. One is content, means how do we author, that's the one part. Second part is how actually you style a block and how you decorate your HTML, means how you decorate the DOM which is created from that authored part. You author block in documents and the HTML generated after that authoring you decorate, means you manipulate that HTML. Why do we need that? We'll talk about it. Now let me come back to my first question again. What is block? So block is a piece of code to achieve a specific UI. To achieve a specific reusable UI means you add a content and different content on different page and you can use the same UI with different content on different pages. This is same as block in AEM. But why do we need it? What is the need of it? So as I said earlier, all the content is authored using tables in Google Doc or Microsoft Word and it is converted to HTML. So if all the content is authored using table and that is converted to HTML, then why can't my front-end developer can style it? Then why do I need a specific block or specific table, right? Block is also authored in a table. We'll see that. I'll come back this question again at end. So keep in mind why we need a block when we can author everything and that can be styled by front-end devs. First, let's understand how you author it. Obviously, I'll talk about the dev part of it. I'll explain how to write code to manipulate this. So how do we author it? Again, the same way you create a table. Inside table, first row contain the name of your blog. Let's say, for example, I have a carousel blog. So the name of this blog is carousel and I keep it in the first row. So when you add this on your doc, it will generate a HTML like this. It will be a blogged content. So as if you remember, I have already explained in sections you have two types of content, default content and blog content. So this will comes in a blog content. So here my blog div starts. So it will create a blog like this, what you see on the left hand side. You can create n number of rows and n number of columns. Yes, you can create different columns than different rows. Okay. So what happened by default, Franklin generate this HTML. So first it will generate a parent div which has a class which is the name of your blog. So if you see here, this is the class, this class, right? This class, which is the name of your blog. Okay. Now for each row, it create a div. You see there's one div and inside div for each column means each cell, it create another div. So if you see on the second row, first it create a div. Inside this, for one cell, it create a div. Whatever content is there inside div, that will go to the first div inside. For the second cell, it will create a second div. You see here, it will create a HTML like this for the first row. Again, keep in mind the inside div will have content what is there in the first row. So how it will work? So whatever content is there, whatever content you add, that content will go here, and whatever content is here, that will go here, right here. Same way for the next row, it will create HTML like this, div for the row and div for the one cell. Same way it will for the others rows as well. And this is by default. If you do not write any code and you create a table like this will generate this kind of HTML, right? Now, if you have, it's not necessary to have same columns in each row. You can definitely merge your columns, means merge your cells. So if you see here in my first row, I have only one row and one column. So in that case, it will create only one div here. So row for entire row, this outer div, and whatever is inside that will go here. Okay, so that way it generate divs for tables. And same way, if you have two columns, so it will create nested two rows. So that way it generate by default HTML. What you see here, if you add another after name in brackets, if you add something, so that will be added as a class name in parent div. You see here, right? So if you see, there's a slider, so this will add as a class. This is very important. This is useful when you style it. So you can add different style on different pages by adding this different class name. So this will be added here. So now you understood, this is the parallel process. In AEM, first we design this functionality, means first we create a component, and based on that component we author the content. But here, first we decide how we author a content. That's important. So how we define this authoring means we decide how many cells, how many rows, and each row how many columns. So this is the first point of when you design a block. After seeing what kind of functionality you have, you decide what kind of table you would be having for a particular functionality, means to generate a particular HTML. And in parallel, your developer will be writing the code for it, right? To style or manipulate HTML. Again, I would say same question, why do we need block? So this happening without writing any code. I could do it in a particular section. I could write this, right? I still did not write any code, but still my HTML is generated. Then why do I need a block? Why do I need to create a file, JS and CSS file for particular block? We'll see that. Now let's get into demo quickly and see how do we need and how do we create blocks. So I'll take example of carousel. First I'll show you my plain HTML, and then I'll show you how do we convert that actual HTML to block. Keep in mind, in Franklin we don't have HTML. We create DOM using JavaScript, using vanilla JavaScript. We don't have anything like Sitely or plain HTML. This HTML is generated dynamically on the runtime. I mean, obviously it will cache. So you will see I created a table, same as explained in second slide, means row. First row, just one row and one column. In second, I have row and two column, and same way I created 5 rows. And I created this table. Again, the slider is, I did not write any single line of code for it. So this is my code base. If you see inside blocks, I don't have any block says carousel. So even if I publish this, let me publish preview basically first, and then I'll publish. So preview, I see the content which is available before actually production. So if you see, this is created. If I check HTML for it, let me check HTML. Let me move it to right. So if I check HTML, you would see here, this is obviously my carousel block. This is default content, so it should be here. If you see, there's a five, let me enhance this, 5 divs, because on my first div I had only one column. So inside this only one div, and the content is row 1, which I have written here. You see the row 1. If you go to the second div, which is second row, which contain two nested divs, one div for one cell in that particular row. So row 2 column 1, row 2 column 2, and same I have added here. So it generate HTML by default without writing any code, and each content whatever you add inside this cell, that will go to the respective div. So this is the carousel which I will create as a block. You see, very simple. It has few images. Along this, I will add some text here as well. Now, let me do F12 and see the HTML for it. So if you see here, it's a very simple slide. We have a div, and inside div we have some content here, right? Now, if you notice here, here's a two buttons. So this next and previous is a button, but we don't create button out of the box using content, right? Means Franklin by default functionality doesn't create buttons. It only create whatever content you added inside the table, and that content was placed inside div. So inside this document, we only add whatever available in my document, right? We can add text with different styles, h1, h2, st, ui, ul, whatever we can add, right? But we can't create button. We can't add button in content. So button, you can't create button. So how I am create this button? How can I manipulate a content, right? How exactly I manipulate this? That's why we need blocks here. So when you want to manipulate the generated HTML, so a generated HTML will create only divs and only the text related elements in your HTML. Let's say p, h, whatever you can create in div, means in doc. If you want to create additional elements, then you have to manipulate. Like if you want to create button, then you have to manipulate. If you want to create forms, if you want to create text fields, for all such kind of fields, you have to manipulate your generated DOM, and you have to create those elements. That's the one of the reason why do you need block. And again, to reusability, so that you can reuse the same functionality again and again. So now question is, how should I design the authoring experience? So in normal AEM website, first we design component. Here we design what should be the authoring experience. So now as I'm designing carousel, so I need image as well as some text. I'll place some text over that image for each slide. So it's up to me how should I design, right? So how I'm designing, so first row I design this, like as I said, like in first row I'll add the content for the previous button. And because it's the only button, so I'm keeping one row and one cell here. In last, I will design the content for the next button. For the rest of the rows, I have slide, right? I have image and some text. So in this first here, I will add image, and here I will add text. The text which actually plays over the images for each slide, like some text here. So what happened? This will be the content of my first previous button. This would be the content of next button, and in between how many rows I would be adding, those will behave as my slide. So each slide will have image here and text here. Okay, so I have moved that content inside block. I created one more folder called block. So that way I design my content. So first, right now I can write anything, but I just added two arrows here, and this is backward arrow for the forward and previous button. For each slide I added an image, and here I added a text here. So right now I did not add any code. Okay, let me publish this before writing any code to handle this content. So by default, it always create this content in div. So you see the content is still there, right? But let me show you. But what if you see here, that gonna be long. See, there's a picture. inside picture, you see here, this is one parent div, and inside we have 5 divs. In the first div, only one div nested which contain this one, and for the second div you'll find 2 divs. First div, the picture, whatever it is, and in second div, whatever the content is. So even without writing any code, this div is generated. But in our case, what do we need? For this previous button, we need a button, right? I show you that HTML. I'll create exactly same DOM for it, right? You can write carousel by any means, by any way, but I'll just replicate what we saw in that HTML. So here for this, I need a button, and for the last one also I need a button. So by default, button is not generated, and there's no way if I can create button using document authoring, not at all. So to manipulate this, we need blocks. So now I would be writing 2 files in block. So how do I create? I'll create a folder. Let me create this first. So I'll create a folder inside blocks or anywhere as per your project. And inside that I'll create 2 files. So let me create a folder here first. So I created a folder called carousel, and inside this I created 2 files, JS and CS, with the same name as the folder, and with the same name what did you give in your doc in that table in the first row. Obviously you can have uppercase there and here lowercase, because we have a condition, we don't check upper and lower. That's fine. But your framework allow you have to write a method called decorate. This is mandatory. In your JS, write a method called decorate, that you should have the same name, and inside this you pass a variable called block. This can be anything as per your name it, whatever name you want to, you can have it, but because framework use block, so I use block. Now inside this method you can iterate rows and columns. So what you can do, block.children. Block.children will give you all the rows, whatever row you have in your document. So here in document, block.children means whatever I showed you here, this block.children, inside it will make a row or array, and you can iterate that. So it will give you these rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this loop will give you all these 5 rows. Right now for each row, again I'm adding a nested loop here and saying row. So I found row here, row.childrens. Now it will give you the columns of each row. That is the most important part of it, how you access the content of a block. So there's 2 loops. One outer loop is for rows, inner loop is for columns. So let's say in our case, this loop will execute only once, because in my first row has only 1 column, means 1 cell, in respectively it will keep executing. So now we will create our own DOM in this JS file, in this function. So whatever we got by default, instead of getting that, we'll manipulate this DOM using this method, using this function. Okay, so I have added code. Now I'll not explain in detail how am I writing, just let me explain at a higher level. So if you see here, I'm getting rows, how many rows I have. So it will give me how many rows. Here I'm executing that loop, means the for loop, obviously. And what I'm checking, if it is a row is equal to 1, so I say r is equal to 0, then I create a button, right? Instead of div, I create a button. Inside that button, I added some additional classes. So you will see there will be a button, and you will see next button dot class list dot add. So these actually the syntax to add classes to your element. Same what I'm doing, and I added this, right? Added this in row. So what I'm doing here, and inside this I created this text here, whatever text I got it, and I added this, append this in the button object. See, whatever button I created, and with this here I'm replacing the content of the row here. So whatever div I had, I replaced that div with the element I created. So I replaced that div with my button which I created. Same way for the last row I created this. For the others row, if you see, I did not replace those. I only added a class here, slide, which I need. Actually, I wrote like this, and for others I'm doing this, right? For others I'm copying the content as it is. I did not modify or decorate, manipulate content for it. I'm only and only adding a class for the others, whatever the row I got in between first and last rows. And I can add a specific class to only column. So if you see here, rows, I have outer loop. Inside, I'm checking when we have the second column. You see the C1. C1 is for the index of my loop, right? You will understand. I'll leave this code with you. I'll not explain much this JavaScript. So for the second column where I have text, I added a specific class because I have written CSS based on this class. So this is how I created a DOM for it, what DOM I wanted for this carousel. Now in this class, I'll add the CSS according to what I want to display. So I'll copy the CSS here. So now this HTML should be converted to HTML what I need. If I refresh this, it should. Okay, why it's not happening? Why? Because I did not move my code. This content is coming from, this is taking my code which is there in GitHub in main branch. So what I'll do, I'll run my local instance, because my local instance will be picking my local code which I did not commit yet. Okay, so I started my local Franklin instance and it started 3.3. Let me copy this content here and hopefully it should work. And yes, it works. See, because now my code is local and my local AEM in this Franklin instance is picking my code. See, now it is happening. So it's working fine. And now earlier, what did you see? The only divs, but because I modify or decorated this HTML, so now if you see here, this one is button. Now you will see inside div, but instead of nested div, these means I replace entire div row. So it's a button now, and last one is also button now, but rest of these are still same divs, but I added additional classes. So if you see now in each row which I use for slide, now it has additional class which I added in my code. And if you come here, the second column, it has slide text. If you see, which I added here, right here, and I was adding class here, right? And where did this parent class coming from? Let me show you that as well. That is also important. So in parent, here you will see a slider class, right? See, I did not add this, but where this is coming from? Here I added an additional class here. So because I wrote CSS based on those classes, so that's why I added these classes. Now you understood how and why. Now you must understand and should be able to answer why do we need block, because I need to modify HTML as per my need. So let me add, so let's see how it is dynamic. So let me add one more row here quickly. So I have added one more fifth slide and I copy the second image, the second one in the fifth. So let me save it and let me preview this. So now in our carousel on my local, we should see a one more slide. We have to see this, right? Let me close this now and close. Okay, now let me go further, 2, 3, 4, 5 and see the fifth one, test row, which I added right away. Earlier there was only 4, now we have 5 slides. So you see the 5 slides, so that way it's dynamic. Whatever you would be adding there, that will be reflected. And that's the reason why you need block. Now you can use this block in any pages, means you can create number of content pages, and where you can use this block and you can style that block based on the parent class. So you can add further if you need further styling. this is very simple example. Let's say you have further other functionality, so you can write and you need to style that different on different pages. So you can change this class. If you change this class, the parent class will be added, whatever you add here, and based on this you can change the themes or the style of that particular blog on different pages. I know this tutorial was very long, but this was important, that's why I taken a lot of time for it. But if still you have any question, add your comment. Thank you.